Nestled in Colorado's high desert, ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies, stands as America's only federal supermax prison. Here, the nation's most dangerous terrorists, bombers, and kingpins endure 23-hour daily solitary in poured concrete cells, under relentless surveillance, with no escape from isolation's crushing grip. Deep in the shadows of American criminal history, 5 men embody the raw terror of homegrown extremism and calculated violence. Terry Nichols, the quiet architect of the Oklahoma City bombing; Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the young jihadist who shattered Boston's marathon; Hoover, the iron-fisted founder of the gangster disciples empire; Reid, the Al-Qaeda recruit known as the Shoe Bomber; and Rudolph, the anti-abortion zealot who bombed Olympics and clinics. Their paths, fueled by hatred, ideology, or ambition, converged on acts of devastating carnage, claiming lives and scarring the nation. Yet all roads led to one inescapable destination: the unyielding concrete hell of ADX Florence. Now let's start. Terry Lynn Nichols, State, Colorado, age 71, sentenced to life. In the quiet farmlands of Michigan, where Terry Lynn Nichols grew up as a shy, unassuming farm boy born on April 1, 1955, few could have imagined the dark path he would tread. It began innocently enough in 1988, when Nichols met Timothy McVeigh during basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia. Both men, disillusioned with the government, bonded over shared grievances fueled by the deadly standoffs at Ruby Ridge in 1992 and Waco in 1993, events that radicalized a generation of anti-government extremists. McVeigh, the more volatile of the two, and Nichols, the methodical planner, found common ground in their paranoia and rage against federal authority. By 1993, McVeigh was crashing at the Nichols family farm in Decker, Michigan, alongside Terry and his brother James. There, in the shadows of rusting barns and endless fields, the seeds of destruction were sown. The trio pored over anti-government literature, discussing ways to strike back. Nichols, using the alias Mike Havens, began acquiring the deadly ingredients. In September 1994, he purchased 2,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate fertilizer from a co-op in McPherson, Kansas, a seemingly mundane transaction that masked its sinister purpose. The following month, Nichols and McVeigh brazenly robbed a quarry in Marion, Kansas, stealing Tovex explosives, blasting caps, and detonating cord under the cover of night. Over the ensuing months, they amassed more fertilizer, totaling nearly 5,000 pounds, along with nitromethane racing fuel and other components, storing them in rented sheds under false names. As winter turned to spring in 1995, the plot accelerated. In mid-April, McVeigh rented a Ryder truck in Junction City, Kansas, while Nichols assisted in staging a getaway car in Oklahoma City and shuttling his co-conspirator around. On April 18, at the remote Geary Lake State Park, the two men meticulously mixed the massive bomb. Barrels of ammonium nitrate soaked in fuel oil, primed with stolen explosives to create an ANFO device capable of unimaginable devastation. Nichols, ever cautious, returned home to Harrington, Kansas, ensuring he was far from the blast zone. At 9:02 a.m. on April 19, 1995, McVeigh parked the yellow Ryder truck in front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in downtown Oklahoma City and lit the fuse. The explosion was cataclysmic, a thunderous roar that shattered glass for miles, collapsing half the 9-story structure in seconds. Rescue workers sifted through rubble stained with blood, pulling out the broken bodies of 168 victims, including 19 innocent children in the building's daycare center. Hundreds more were maimed, their lives forever altered. It remains one of the deadliest acts of domestic terrorism in American history, a calculated assault born from hatred. The unraveling came swiftly. Just 90 minutes after the blast, McVeigh was pulled over for a traffic stop north of the city, no license plate. A concealed weapon and traces of explosive residue clung to his clothes. As investigators traced the truck's axle to the rental agency, Nichols' name surfaced. On April 21, hearing he was wanted, Nichols voluntarily surrendered at the Harrington police station, enduring 9 hours of interrogation before his arrest. The next day, FBI agents raided his home, uncovering a chilling arsenal of blasting caps, leftover ammonium nitrate, bomb-making manuals, and a map of Oklahoma City with the Murrah building marked. Federal charges followed quickly: conspiracy to use a weapon of mass destruction, actual use of it, and 8 counts of murdering federal agents. Trials were moved to Denver, Colorado, to escape Oklahoma's inflamed public opinion. McVeigh's 1997 trial ended in a death sentence. Nichols, separate and starting later that year, painted him as the indispensable accomplice who sourced and stole materials, helped mix the bomb, and provided logistical support. Over 100 witnesses testified to his deep involvement. On December 23, 1997, he was convicted of conspiracy and 8 counts of involuntary manslaughter, a lesser charge reflecting debates over his intent. When the jury deadlocked on the death penalty in June 1998, Nichols escaped execution, sentenced instead to life without parole. He was shipped to ADX Florence, the infamous supermax prison in Colorado, home to the nation's most dangerous offenders. But justice in Oklahoma demanded more. After McVeigh's execution in June 2001, state prosecutors charged Nichols with 161 counts of first-degree murder, 1 for each civilian victim, including an unborn child, plus arson and conspiracy. The 2004 trial in McAlester was grueling, reliving the horror through survivor testimony. Nichols was found guilty on all counts in May, but again the jury hung on death. On August 9, Judge Stephen Taylor imposed the harshest sentence possible: 161 consecutive life terms without parole, the longest individual prison term in U.S. history. As of 2026, at age 71, Terry Nichols remains entombed in the concrete isolation of ADX Florence. He spends 23 hours a day in a tiny cell, under constant surveillance, with no hope of release. Over the years, he has penned letters expressing partial remorse, apologizing to victims' families, while still downplaying his role, claiming McVeigh manipulated him, or that he thought the bomb targeted an empty structure. Multiple appeals have failed, and lawsuits against prison conditions dismissed. Nichols, once a quiet farmer turned terrorist enabler, now fades into the supermax's silence, a living reminder of the fragility of peace and the enduring cost of hatred. The scars of April 19 linger, not just in Oklahoma City's memorial chairs, but in the nation's collective memory of homegrown evil. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, State, Colorado, age 32, death row. On a crisp Patriots' Day in April 2013, the streets of Boston buzzed with the triumphant cheers of the marathon's finish line, a celebration of endurance and community. But beneath that joy lurked a chilling ideology of vengeance. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, a seemingly all-American college student born in Kyrgyzstan on July 26, 1993, and his older brother Tamerlan had succumbed to self-radicalized jihadism, inspired by Al-Qaeda's online propaganda, particularly the magazine Inspire. Tamerlan, the dominant force, devoured extremist content from 2011 onward, dragging his younger sibling, once a scholarship recipient and wrestler at the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth, into a vortex of hatred aimed at America's wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. By early 2013, the brothers escalated from rhetoric to action. In February, they scavenged gunpowder from fireworks to build devastating pressure cooker bombs. Following Inspire's step-by-step guides, March saw them honing their marksmanship at a New Hampshire range. The plan crystallized strike at the heart of American innocence. On April 15, around 2:40 p.m., amid the throng near the finish line on Boylston Street, Tamerlan, black cap, backpack slung low, placed the first bomb near Marathon Sports. Minutes later, Dzhokhar, white cap, casual as any spectator, set the second about 190 meters away, close to the Forum restaurant. At 2:49 p.m., the first device erupted in a fireball of nails, ball bearings, and shrapnel. 12 seconds later, the second detonated. The blasts tore through the crowd, killing 3 instantly: 29-year-old Crystal Campbell, 23-year-old Boston University graduate student Lingzi Liu, and 8-year-old Martin Richard, who had been cheering with his family. More than 260 others suffered horrific injuries, limbs shredded, lives shattered in an instant. The brothers slipped away calmly, blending into the chaos they had unleashed. One of the deadliest domestic terror attacks since 9/11, the manhunt ignited fury and fear. On April 18, the FBI released surveillance images: Black Hat, Tamerlan, and White Hat, Dzhokhar. That night, desperation turned deadly. The brothers murdered MIT police officer Sean Collier in his cruiser, attempting to steal his gun. They carjacked an SUV in Cambridge, confessed their crimes to the driver, tossed pipe bombs, and engaged in a furious Watertown shootout. Tamerlan, gravely wounded, was run over by Dzhokhar in a frantic escape and died. Boston locked down on April 19, an unprecedented shelter in place for millions, as authorities hunted the fugitive. Dzhokhar, bleeding and cornered, hid in a dry docked boat in a Watertown backyard. Thermal imaging spotted him. After a final volley of gunfire, he surrendered, gravely injured. Scrawled on the boat's interior in pens a manifesto justifying the carnage as retaliation for U.S. actions abroad. Charged from his hospital bed on April 22 with using a weapon of mass destruction resulting in death and conspiracy, Dzhokhar faced 30 federal counts by July, including murder and bombing. His 2015 Boston trial was a grim reckoning. Prosecutors painted him as a willing participant, not merely under his brother's sway. On April 8, he was convicted on all counts. The penalty phase weighed mitigation, his youth, family influence against the horror. On May 15, the jury delivered death by lethal injection on 6 capital counts tied to his bomb. Formal sentencing came June 24. Dzhokhar offered a brief apology, perceived by many survivors as hollow. Appeals dragged the wounds open. Transferred to ADX Florence, the Colorado supermax fortress housing the nation's most notorious, he endured 23-hour daily solitary under stringent special administrative measures. In July 2020, a federal appeals court vacated the death sentence, citing juror bias and pretrial publicity errors. But on March 4, 2022, the Supreme Court reversed, reinstating it 6-3. The fight persisted. Defense claims of concealed juror prejudice resurfaced. In March 2024, the First Circuit ordered an investigation. Efforts to recuse trial judge George O'Toole over alleged impartial comments failed in July 2025, with a panel denying mandamus. In August 2025, Tsarnaev petitioned for full and bank review, still pending as delays mounted amid sealed filings. As of early January 2026, at age 32, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev remains on federal death row at ADX Florence, his sentence formally in force. President Biden's late 2024 commutation of 37 death row inmates explicitly excluded Tsarnaev along with Dylan Roof and Robert Bowers for terrorism and hate crimes. No federal executions occurred under Biden's moratorium, and with ongoing appeals, none loom imminently. Yet the shadow of potential resumption under a new administration hangs heavy. Tsarnaev, once Dzhokhar, the promising immigrant kid, now embodies radicalization's lethal toll, confined in concrete isolation, his fate tethered to endless legal threads, while Boston's scars, and the empty chairs at its memorial, endure as testament to the day innocence shattered. Larry Hoover, State, Illinois, age 75, sentenced to life. In the gritty streets of Chicago's South Side, where poverty and desperation bred ruthless ambition, Larry Hoover emerged as a kingpin whose shadow still looms over the city's violent history. Born in Mississippi on November 30, 1950, and relocated to Chicago at age 4, Hoover's descent into crime began early. By 13, he was running with the Supreme Gangsters, pulling off petty thefts and robberies that escalated into a life of organized mayhem. In the late 1960s, as a charismatic young leader, he took the helm of the Supreme Gangsters and orchestrated a pivotal merger with rival black disciples, led by David Barksdale, forming the Black Gangster Disciple Nation, later simplified to Gangster Disciples. GD. When Barksdale died in 1974, Hoover ascended unchallenged as chairman, transforming the outfit into a sprawling empire that dominated drug trafficking, extortion, and turf wars across the South Side. The turning point came on February 26, 1973, when Hoover, suspecting 19-year-old drug dealer William Pookie Young of skimming profits and product, ordered his execution. Young was gunned down, and Hoover's swift arrest led to a murder conviction that December. Sentenced to 200 years, he began his term at Illinois' Stateville Correctional Center, a fortress that failed to contain his influence. Even behind bars, Hoover ruled with an iron fist. Using coded messages smuggled during visits and attorney meetings, he directed GD operations as the gang ballooned to around 30,000 members, spreading to over 35 states and generating an estimated $100 million annually from narcotics. In the early 1990s, he attempted a public rebrand, proclaiming the GD as Growth and Development, a political movement against violence, while prosecutors alleged it was a smokescreen for continued criminality. Federal authorities, after a grueling 17-year probe dubbed Operation Headache involving FBI, ATF, and local police complete with wiretaps and informants, struck in 1995. On August 22, Hoover and 38 top GD lieutenants faced a 40-count indictment for drug conspiracy, extortion, money laundering, and running a continuing criminal enterprise. The 1997 Chicago trial laid bare his prison empire. Convicted on all charges, he drew 6 consecutive life sentences in 1998. Transferred to ADX Florence, the infamous Colorado supermax home to the nation's most dangerous. Hoover endured near total isolation, 23 hours a day in a concrete cell, under relentless surveillance. Appeals faltered, but Hoover's cause gained unlikely allies. In 2014, his longtime partner Wendell Jenkins Hoover launched the Larry Hoover Project, pushing for clemency. By 2018, rapper Kanye West now yet championed him, pleading directly to President Trump in the Oval Office. The effort peaked in 2021 with the star-studded Free Larry Hoover benefit concert in Los Angeles, co-headlined by Ye and Drake, drawing global attention to prison reform. A 2021 bid for reduction under the First Step Act failed. Then, on May 28, 2025, in a flurry of clemency actions, President Donald Trump commuted Hoover's federal life sentences, crediting years of advocacy from Ye and others. Ye posted effusive thanks, hailing Trump for freeing Larry Hoover. Yet freedom remained elusive. The commutation erased only federal time, leaving the 200-year state murder sentence intact. Hoover, then 74 and ailing, was promptly transferred from ADX Florence's brutal solitary back to Illinois' custody, initially held pending placement in a state facility. Supporters redoubled efforts. Family and attorneys petitioned Governor J.B. Pritzker for clemency, emphasizing Hoover's renunciation of gang life, clean disciplinary record, and completion of over 100 rehabilitation programs. Since his 1973 crime predated Illinois' 1978 abolition of discretionary parole for most offenses, Hoover qualified for review, a rarity, as he was among just dozens still under the old indeterminate system. Previous parole bids had been denied, but momentum built. His co-defendant in the Young murder had been paroled decades earlier. By early January 2026, at age 75, Hoover remains incarcerated in the Illinois prison system, his exact facility undisclosed amid security concerns. A fresh clemency petition, filed in late 2025, advanced to the Illinois Prisoner Review Board docket for potential hearing in early 2026. Hoover insists he's reformed, eager to counsel against street violence using his hard-earned wisdom. Critics, including former prosecutors, decry any leniency, citing the bloodshed he orchestrated. The gangster disciple's fractured legacy persists in Chicago's ongoing gang wars, a testament to the empire Hoover built, and the enduring debate over redemption for those who once reigned through terror. Richard Colvin, Reid, State, Colorado, age of 52, sentenced to life. In the shadowy underbelly of London's Bromley district, where urban decay met broken dreams, Richard Colvin Reid entered the world on August 12, 1973, a child of chaos, with a Jamaican English father entrenched in a life of carjacking and prison stints, and a British mother struggling to hold the fragments together. Reid's early years were a whirlwind of neglect. His father was incarcerated at his birth, leaving a void filled by street temptations. By his teens in the 1980s, at Thomas Tallis School in Kidbrooke, he morphed into a delinquent, ditching classes at 16 to embrace the thrill of graffiti under the tag, enroll, and petty crimes with local gangs. His rap sheet ballooned over a dozen convictions for muggings, thefts, and assaults, culminating in a 1992 three-year sentence for street robbery. Locked away in Feltham Young Offenders Institution, and later Maidstone, or Blundestone Prison, Reid's transformation began not toward redemption, but deeper into darkness. Influenced by Muslim inmates, he converted to Sunni Salafist Islam, emerging in 1995 as a fervent devotee, frequenting Brixton Mosque to study Arabic and pray. Freedom only amplified his radical drift. By 1996-1998, Reid gravitated to Finsbury Park Mosque, a notorious hotbed under the fiery cleric Abu Hamza al-Mazri, where anti-Western sermons fueled his burgeoning extremism. Here, he crossed paths with terrorist recruiters like Jamal Beghel, linked to a foiled 2001 plot against the U.S. Embassy in Paris. Reid's worldview hardened. He railed against perceived injustices, absorbing ideologies that painted America as the Great Satan. In 1999-2000, his odyssey took him to Pakistan and Afghanistan, where Al-Qaeda's training camps awaited. Intelligence later revealed he honed skills at anti-American hubs in Lahore under figures like Mubarak Ali Jilani, securing a fake passport from a British consulate abroad and drifting through Europe with a Peshawar address, a known Al-Qaeda nexus. By November 2001, alongside fellow Brit Sajid Badat, Reid trekked back to Pakistan, crossing into Afghanistan to receive his deadly assignment, shoe bombs, laced with PET and explosive mixed with Tape-P detonator, concealed in hollowed-out soles, designed to obliterate transatlantic flights. The plot's climax unfolded in December 2001, a mere 3 months after 9/11's horrors. Reid and Badat split upon returning to the UK. Reid slipped into Belgium for 10 days, then trained to Paris on December 16. On the 21st at Charles de Gaulle Airport, he attempted to board American Airlines Flight 63 to Miami, a one-way ticket bought in cash. No luggage, his disheveled appearance raising red flags. Denied boarding for suspicious answers and demeanor, he holed up in a nearby hotel. Undeterred, he returned the next day, December 22, slipping onto the Boeing 767 with 197 souls aboard. Mid-flight, after meals were served over the Atlantic, Reid struck fumbling in his seat. He tried igniting the fuse in his shoe with matches. Acrid smoke wafted. Flight attendant Hermes Motordier confronted him, only to be shoved aside. Reid bit another crew member, but passengers, ordinary heroes like Quame James, piled on, restraining him with headphone cords, seatbelts, and plastic cuffs. An onboard doctor administered sedatives from the first aid kit. The bomb fizzled, thwarted by rain-dampened fuses and sweaty feet. The plane diverted to Boston's Logan Airport, where FBI agents swarmed, confirming the PTM payload enough to rip a hole in the fuselage. Arrested on touchdown, Reid faced initial charges of interfering with a flight crew on December 24, held without bail. By December 28, tests verified the explosives, mirroring Badat's abandoned pair. A January 16, 2002, grand jury indictment piled on 9 federal counts: weapon of mass destruction, attempted murder, bombing an aircraft, and more as one later dropped. Investigations unraveled his Al-Qaeda ties, training in Afghan camps, coordination with Badat arrested in 2003, painting Reid as a foot soldier in Osama bin Laden's jihad. Pleading guilty to the remaining 8 charges on October 4, 2002. To dodge death row, Reid stood defiant in court. On January 31, 2003, Judge William Young delivered justice 3 consecutive life sentences plus 110 years, no parole, and $2 million in fines, a $250,000 per count. Reid snarled, "I am at war with your country. I am a follower of Osama bin Laden." Young retorted icily, "You are not an enemy combatant, you are a terrorist." Gesturing to the American flag, "It will endure long after your time." Since 2003, Reid has rotted in ADX Florence, Colorado's supermax hellhole, 23 hours, daily in solitary under special administrative measures to stifle his radical proselytizing. In 2009, he sued over communication restrictions, access to an imam, and group prayer, staging a hunger strike that led to force feeding. The suit failed as measures lapsed. As of early 2026, at age 52, Reid remains entombed there, unrepentant and isolated, a perpetual threat in the eyes of authorities. His botched plot reshaped global aviation security, mandatory shoe removal at checkpoints, a daily reminder of vulnerability. Reid, the shoe bomber, embodies post-9/11 paranoia, a street thug turned zealot, whose failed spark ignited enduring fears of lone wolf terror from the skies. Eric Rudolph, Estate, Colorado, age of 59, sentenced to life. In the misty hollows of North Carolina's Nantahala Mountains, where survivalist dreams clashed with the encroaching modern world, Eric Robert Rudolph was forged into a fanatic. Born on September 19, 1966, in Merritt Island, Florida, to a Catholic family, his father a carpenter who succumbed to skin cancer. When Eric was just 9, the boy relocated to a rugged homestead that bred isolation and ideology. Homeschooled at Western Carolina University after a turbulent adolescence, Rudolph absorbed his mother and brother's extreme views, anti-abortion zealotry, Holocaust denial, and a seething hatred for government overreach and societal degeneracy. By 1987, he enlisted in the U.S. Army at Fort Benning, Georgia, where he trained in explosives and demolition tactics, only to be dishonorably discharged in 1989 for marijuana use. Back in the civilian world, he eked out a living as a carpenter and weed dealer, but his radicalization deepened through affiliations with groups like the Army of God. By the mid-1990s, Rudolph viewed America as a moral abyss, ripe for violent reckoning against abortion clinics, LGBTQ spaces, and federal symbols. The terror spree ignited on July 27, 1996, amid the glittering spectacle of the Atlanta Summer Olympics. At 1:20 a.m., in Centennial Olympic Park, packed with revelers, a pipe bomb stuffed with nails and screws detonated, shredding the night. Alice Hawthorne, 44, was killed instantly, 111 others were maimed, and another victim suffered a fatal heart attack. Rudolph had phoned in a warning to 911 30 minutes prior. His voice calm and calculated, but the blast still erupted, claiming credit as the Army of God. In letters to media, he decried the games as a celebration of global socialism. Undeterred, he struck again on January 16, 1997, at Northside Family Planning Services in Sandy Springs, Georgia, a double bombing designed to maximize carnage. The first device exploded at 9:30 a.m., drawing rescuers. The second, timed perfectly, wounded 7 more, mostly police and EMTs, in a sadistic trap. Emboldened, Rudolph targeted Atlanta's Otherside Lounge, a vibrant LGBTQ bar, on February 21, 1997. The midnight blast injured 5 patrons, with Rudolph's accompanying manifesto railing against homosexual sodomites as abominations. His final strike came January 29, 1998, at Birmingham's New Woman all-women health care clinic. At 7:30 a.m., the explosion claimed off-duty cop Robert Sanderson, 35, and gravely wounded nurse Emily Lyons, who lost an eye and endured lifelong scars. This marked America's first fatal abortion clinic bombing, a grim milestone in domestic extremism. By May 5, 1998, Rudolph topped the FBI's 10 most wanted list, a $1 million bounty on his head. License plate traces from Birmingham linked to his brother Daniel fueled the hunt, but Rudolph vanished into the Appalachian wilderness, a 500,000-acre labyrinth of dense forests and hidden coves. Living as a ghost, he scavenged dumpsters, pilfered gardens, and evaded hundreds of agents armed with helicopters, tracking dogs, and infrared tech in one of history's costliest manhunts. For 5 grueling years, he penned justifications from his campsites, mailing rants against the homosexual agenda and federal tyranny. Close calls abounded, abandoned tents, stolen food caches, but Rudolph's survivalist upbringing kept him one step ahead, a phantom haunting the Nantahala National Forest. Dawn broke on May 31, 2003, when rookie cop Jeff Postel spotted a disheveled, long-bearded man rummaging through a Save-A-Lot dumpster in Murphy, North Carolina. At 3:30 a.m., starved and ragged, Rudolph surrendered without a fight, his capture ending a saga that had gripped the nation. Detained in Birmingham, he confessed during interrogations, guiding authorities to 250 pounds of stolen dynamite, buried in the woods, averting potential disasters. DNA from hair samples and handwritten letters sealed his fate. In a 2005 federal plea deal to evade the death penalty, Rudolph admitted to all charges: conspiracy with weapons of mass destruction, murder, arson. He framed his acts as a war against moral decay, showing no remorse. On July 18, Judge C. Linwood Smith sentenced him to 4 life terms without parole for the Georgia bombings. August 22 added 2 more for Birmingham. The judge branded him cowardly and evil, ordering $2.3 million in restitution to victims whose lives he shattered. Since 2005, Rudolph has moldered in ADX Florence, Colorado's supermax fortress, a concrete tomb where he spends 23 hours daily in solitary, under unyielding surveillance. There he authored Between the Lines of Drift, the memoirs of a militant, in 2013, peddling his unrepentant ideology. Appeals crumbled through 2025, amid podcasts like American Shrapnel on AL.com dissecting his legacy in rising domestic extremism. As of early 2026 at 59, Rudolph remains isolated and defiant, a symbol of homegrown hate. His bombings reshaped security at events and clinics, but the scars, physical and psychic, endure. A chilling reminder that one man's crusade can unleash hell on the innocent. In the frozen silence of ADX Florence's cells, save for Hoover, now transferred yet still imprisoned, these 5 men linger as ghosts of their former fury: Nichols and Rudolph unrepentant in eternal life sentences. Tsarnaev awaiting a death penalty tangled in appeals, Reid defiant in isolation. Their crimes reshaped security, haunted survivors, and ignited debates over justice and redemption. Time erodes bodies but not legacies. The echoes of explosions, manifestos, and bloodshed endure, warning of radicalization's poison. In supermax shadows, hatred's architects serve as grim reminders: evil contained, but never fully erased.